Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This will be the continuation of Swallow the Stars. This will be Part 39, Chapter 39, entitled Where Credit is Due. Izuku finds himself coming into consciousness slowly, starting with a rhythmic pattern of mechanical sounds, a whirring noise overhead, a metallic rattle to his right, and a beeping that he can just barely make out to his left. Something in his brain makes a connection between these sounds and a hospital, pulling up memories of the last time he woke up in a bright white room with a scar on his neck from a bullet. There is a warm weight on his hand. He flexes his fingers, trying to see if he can get a better grasp on it, both physically and mentally. It's soft but also rough, and it dwarfs his own hand. Izuku. Immediately tears spring to his eyes, and he blinks them open to find not bright white overhead lights, but a soft amber glow coming from a large window and light green and blue illuminations from whatever machinery is in the room. At his side, holding his left hand, is Aizawa. "Hi, Dad," he says, his voice coming out scratching and hoarse. Aizawa leans into the side, reaching his free hand somewhere that Izuku can't see. When it re-enters Izuku's vision, he's holding a cup of water with a straw. "Here," Aizawa says, tender and soft in ways he usually isn't, just loud enough to carry to Izuku's good ear. Izuku drinks slowly, not really trusting himself or his muscles yet to handle even something this simple, but he doesn't stop drinking until the cup is empty. "Thank you. How long have I been out?" "Just a few hours." When the cup is set aside, Aizawa puts both his hands around Izuku's left hand and lifts it, pressing a long kiss into his knuckles. "You've got to stop scaring me like this, problem child." Guilt washes through Izuku, and he winces and slips his gaze away. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." It's not his fault that trouble's attracted to him like a magnet, but he chose to follow his gut and start searching for something that he technically could have ignored. He chose to jump down into that alley when he technically could have stayed safe on the roof. It would have killed him to do so, chipped away something inside of him that's vital to life, but he could have done that. A hand slipped into his hair and runs down his face until it cups his cheek. "No. Hey, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to blame you. I know it's not your fault." When Izuku flicks his gaze back to Aizawa, he finds him upset and exhausted. One of those is a rare look on him, and Izuku doesn't like it at all. His dad is stoic and strong, the pillar for everyone around him to lean on. For him to be so upset that it shows on his face is uncharacteristic enough that it's worrying. Izuku squeezes his hand as tight as he can. "I'm okay, Dad. I'm okay, I promise. I just overused Amahaki." Now isn't the time to share with Aizawa what happened when he took his left glove off first, but he will as soon as they're both a little more stable. "You got stabbed." "Nowhere important." He tries for a smile, and the startled laugh Aizawa gives is worth it. "I'm alive. I'm not seriously injured. Not like Jetta and Ida and that other person." He swallows, smile slipping from his face. "How are they?" Aizawa gestures across the room, and Izuku follows with his eyes. In another bed on the opposite wall, Ida lays fast asleep. "He was put through surgery as soon as the ambulance arrived. He's going to have physical therapy even after a round of healing quirks, and he's going to have to rest his shoulder for a while, but he's expected to make a full recovery." "That's good." Some of the tension in Izuku's shoulders eases. "Jetta is still in surgery. I don't know anything else about her condition." And the tension is back again. "It's my fault she got hurt," Izuku says, voice barely more than a whisper. "If I had just used her distraction to fight, I thought she had it, but I should have helped. I should have—" "Izuku, no." Aizawa leans forward to grab his attention. "You can't blame yourself for this. She's a pro-hero. She knows the risks of everything she does, and her injuries are not your fault." Izuku wants to believe him. He does. That desperate aching desire to release this blame from his shoulders is almost suffocating. But as he replays the events of the night in his head, he can't help but think that Jetta slipping into the illusion of her quirk was supposed to be an opening for him, that he was supposed to attack Stain while his attention was divided, or at least provide a distraction so that she could attack him. Maybe Aizawa can sense that Izuku doesn't really believe him, but he sighs and scoots the chair forward. "Why don't you tell me what happened? Walk me through the whole night." "Wait, what about the other person?" Izuku's eyes flicker around the room, but the other two beds are empty. "There was someone else there. Are they in surgery too?" Something regretful twists in Aizawa's expression, but he doesn't look away, doesn't skirt around the question now that it's been asked. "Pro-hero native died on the scene. He was probably dead by the time you got there." Aizawa sighs. "There's no doubt in my mind that native was Stain's only target tonight. He kills in sets of 3. Izuku finishes the sentence for him, nodding his head numbly. Yeah, I know. Ingenium was supposed to be the third, but Staines changed his mind about killing him and left him alive. His hands clench into fists over the rough hospital sheets. If only Ida had stayed hidden. If only he'd called for backup when he arrived. If only he hadn't gone for Stain in the first place. Sure, in any of those scenarios, Native could still be dead, but Ida wouldn't be hurt. Jetta wouldn't be fighting for her life, and Izuku never would have had to face a reality where his dad died in front of him. Tears well up and spill out of his eyes as that particular reality plays over and over through his head, the cut across his dad's chest, the blood that dribbles out of his mouth, the vacant look as he falls to his knees. The scene plays, Aizawa falls, the scene plays again. He doesn't even realize that Aizawa had climbed onto the bed and pulled him into his arms until the door opens and a nurse walks in. Aizawa cradles Izuku's head to his chest, fingers combing unkempt hair. Can you give us a few more minutes, please? He asks, and the nurse says something that Izuku can't quite hear and then disappears back out the door. Talk to me, kid, Aizawa murmurs, thumb sweeping along Izuku's upper arm. What's going on in that head of yours? Hiccuping around his tears, Izuku tries to regain control of his breathing, tries to bring himself back into a calmer frame of mind. It doesn't really work, but Aizawa's here, warm and solid and alive. That helps more than any breathing pattern ever could. I watched you die, he says, when he can finally force the words out. I saw you. You instead of Jetta. You died. The rocking motion that Aizawa starts up is nothing new, and Izuku sinks into the familiar soothing rhythm. Shh, Izuku, it's okay. I'm not dead. I'm right here. He holds Izuku tightly, the circle of his arms almost crushing, and it's exactly what Izuku needs. I know. Izuku draws in a deep breath and burrows into Aizawa's chest. He feels incredibly young and vulnerable right now, but the sound of Aizawa's steady heartbeat is right next to his ear, and his fingers are carding carefully through his hair, and his hand is squeezing Izuku's arm, and he's alive. It was a new part of my quirk. I took the left glove off first, because of the knife. He remembers the fiery pain of being stabbed through his bones, blade sunk all the way from the back of his hand out through the palm. He remembers blood dripping down his fingers and the way his brain clouded with pain while his body moved through muscle memory alone. But, just like when he got shot, he forces himself to say the words. He has to face it if he's going to move on from it. What do you mean? Aizawa asks, a tension in his voice that doesn't make its way into the lines of his body. He is still gentle where he holds Izuku, but his voice has tipped closer to his teacher tone. Walk me through it, Izuku. Start from the beginning if you have to. So he does. Izuku starts from the beginning. He talks his dad through every step he took, leaving the agency, the normal part of patrol, the first explosion. He thinks the nurse returns around then, but Aizawa doesn't cut him off, and she must decide to come back later because she never approaches them, and Izuku never stops talking. He hesitates around the Nomu attack. Even thinking about it makes him remember the USJ and his dad's broken body, which leads him back to the vision he had of Aizawa dying. But Aizawa pushes him past it, and Izuku keeps talking. It's hard to talk about the run to Stain without pointing out everything Izuku could have done to make the night turn out differently. If that group of civilians hadn't been there, if he'd been faster getting Rebel away from those civilians, if he and Jetta had been faster in between one group and the next, but Aizawa steers him away from those thoughts, asking only for facts, for truths, for the series of events that's happened. Izuku mentions jumping into the alley before Jetta, and Aizawa's arm tightens protectively around him. He knows, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that if Aizawa had been there, Izuku wouldn't have gotten permission to jump into that alley. Perhaps in this reality, neither of them would have gone down there. Maybe they would have dragged Stain up to the roof instead, taken the fight away from Ida and Native's corpse altogether. But in this reality, Izuku jumped first, and Jetta fell. And then he gets to the part that's still messing with him, the part that's going to haunt him, maybe for years, the knife and the glove and the explosion of power and the ripples of reality. He explains it the best he can. But he knows that his descriptions fall short of the real thing. Nothing seemed real in the moment except for Amahaki's voice in his head. I'm still not sure this is real, he admits, barely audible, against Aizawa's chest. I know there are bandages over my palms. I know you're here, but I'm not sure. Aizawa, the level-headed and amazing dad that he is, takes it all in stride. How can I prove it to you? I'll tell you a million things that have happened in this reality that you'll know is the truth. Starting with the fact that you're my son, and I love you very much, and I'm glad that you're safe. Izuku chokes on a laugh and twists his torso so that he can wrap his arms around Aizawa's waist. I think a million's too big of a number. Start lower. His head hurts. His chest is tight. He hasn't stopped crying yet, and he already feels like starting again. I love you too. I'm glad you're not dead. They sit like that for a while longer, trading stories of their years together. Every smile, every laugh, every word cements Izuku more and more firmly into a sense of mental stability. He may have glimpsed other realities, but he didn't get stuck on any of them. He's here, and here is home. Here is a life with Aizawa and Hizashi and Hitoshi and Shoto. Shit, he should really call them. Did you tell the others? Izuku asks, wiping at his eyes. He is tempted to lean away from Aizawa's hold on him, if only to see his dad's face again, but Aizawa isn't usually this clingy, and Izuku doesn't want to be the one to end the contact if it's something Aizawa needs. Aizawa hums, chest vibrating gently against Izuku's ear. He's not rocking them anymore, but his cheek is resting against the top of Izuku's head. If he's not careful, Izuku's going to find himself falling asleep in his arms. Hizashi got the call from the hospital, same as I did. He's going to assign Kaminari some hand-to-hand training with one of the sidekicks tomorrow so that he can come visit. Part of Izuku feels bad that Kaminari is losing out on a day with his mentor, but his classmate really does need some instruction on hand-to-hand, and it doesn't have to be Hizashi to teach him, and Izuku really wants his dad. I figured you can handle the calls to your boyfriend and your brother when you're on the way home tomorrow. Izuku sputters, leaning away from Aizawa enough to stare up at him. Aizawa gives him an equally unimpressed and amused look before gathering him back up against his chest. What? Aizawa asks, and Izuku can hear the smirk in his voice. Did you really think I wouldn't notice that you and Shinzo were dating? Really? Well, when he says it like that. It's not that we didn't think you would notice, Izuku whines, idly playing with the folds in Aizawa's shirt. I just didn't know how to bring it up. How about hey Dad, I'm dating Shinzo, Aizawa offers, around a quiet laugh. You can't tell me you thought Hizashi and I, of all people, would judge you. Izuku groans and buries his face in Aizawa's chest. No, I don't know. At first I didn't say anything because I didn't want to jinx it. We didn't even admit to each other that we were dating for a long time. Honestly, it didn't even occur to me to label it. But by the time we did, it felt like too long had passed to say anything, and I don't know. Well, I'm glad I decided to say something then, Aizawa says, since it seems like you weren't ever going to. When Izuku just huffs, Aizawa laughs again and presses a kiss to the top of Izuku's head. Silence folds in around them for a few minutes, and Aizawa starts to gently rock them again. Izuku's exhaustion comes back to him almost immediately. Sleep if you can, problem child, Aizawa murmurs into his hair. I feel bad for that nurse, Izuku mumbles as he nuzzles against Aizawa's shoulder. She never got to check on me. Probably just wanted to know how much pain you're in. Izuku hums, thoughtful. I'm fine. I've had worse. Aizawa scoffs. Those words are banned in my presence from here on out. Pain scale problem child 1 to 10. The smile that splits Izuku's lips is so broad it hurts. What's a 10? Ready to pass out. Maybe a 3 then, although I am sleepy. He'd been at a 10 in the alley, so whatever drugs they have him on must be pretty good, or actually, a healing quirk is more likely, since he is more lucid than not, and there isn't a cast over his right hand. Aizawa presses another kiss into Izuku's hair and runs a palm soothingly along his spine. I'll pass on the message. Good night, Izuku. Night, Dad. Izuku lets himself gradually slip away to sleep. The next time Izuku wakes up, it's to daylight streaming through the window. Aizawa isn't holding him anymore. Actually, he's not even in the room, and it makes Izuku feel a little lost for a moment, before he settles back into reality. He's in the hospital, tucked under warm but scratchy blankets, hooked up to machines that tell him his heart rate and blood pressure and other things that he doesn't understand enough to make sense of. On the bed across from him, Ida is awake and on his phone. Izuku honestly isn't sure if he can talk to Ida without yelling right now, so he chooses to ignore him and turns his head to the side. The bed beside Ida is still empty, but the one on Izuku's side of the room is occupied. It takes him a moment to blink past the overwhelming amount of white in the room before he registers the starlit black hair and the dark complexion of his mentor. Jeddah, he says purposefully, keeping his voice quiet in case she's sleeping. It's hard to tell from here. He can see Ida look up at him as he's in his peripheral, but he's solely focused on Jeddah right now. To Izuku's surprise and delight, Jeddah turns to him with a smile that starts small and spreads quickly across her face. Hey there, kid. Izuku wants to get out of bed and wrap her in a hug, but he's a bit chained to the bed with his IV and the other shit hooked up to him, so when he thinks it's ridiculous because he's not even wearing a cast on his hand, though he is, admittedly, still coming down from his personal form of quirk exhaustion, instead, he settles for a bright smile and a sarcastic, You look like shit. Ida makes an offended squawking sort of noise, but Jetta just laughs loudly. Oh, I bet I do. I've only been out of surgery for about 2 hours. Shock filters through Izuku, and then he's sitting up straight and leaning over the edge of the bed. What? Why aren't you sleeping? Jetta, you need rest. In his 3 days as her intern, the most prominent thing Izuku has learned about Jetta is that she's notoriously bad at taking care of herself. Dark Knock, her boss, is often the one who forces her to eat and leave the agency when her work hours are over. Izuku had taken on some of that responsibility in the past few days, but it's not like he has any real sway over her. Jetta snorts and brushes his concern off with a loose wave of her hand. Nah, I'm not tired. They pulled me out of surgery. I woke up, and because I was lucid, the police stopped in for a chat with me, for a few seconds before I was moved in here. Your dad fucked off to get coffee and promised to bring me a cup, so I'm staying awake for that, thank you very much. She narrows her eyes at him. By the way, good to finally put a hero name to him. You could have warned me you were raised by the unofficial number 3 underground hero. Ah, well, Izuku shrugs. Didn't think it mattered. I said he trained me, and you didn't complain about the level I'm at. Cheeky brat. Old lady. The door slides open and Aizawa steps through with a paper cup of coffee in each hand. He glances between the two of them, his mouth twitching up on one side. You two really do get along. Guess I'm not surprised. He uses the sole of his boot to close the door behind him, before crossing the room to pass off one of the cups to Jetta. Thank you for taking care of him. Jetta rolls her eyes. Don't get soft to me, Eraser, even if it's a good look on you. Fuck you, too. Aizawa's tone is teasing, though, something that Izuku's used to hearing around Hizashi and Auntie Kayama. He bets Ida's shocked off his ass, though, and sure enough, when he glances at his classmate, Ida's watching the whole exchange with wide, flitting eyes. Aizawa leaves Jetta's side and perches on the edge of Izuku's bed, reaching out to ruffle his hair. Feeling better? Yeah, Izuku replies honestly. Physically, he's fine. His hand doesn't hurt too much, his muscles are a little fatigued from all the running, and he can feel the echoes of some bruises, but he's fine. Mentally, however, maybe not so much. Still a little frayed, I guess, but hopefully by tomorrow that'll be gone and I'll be normal again. The shit with Amahaki's power bursting from his left hand, and it left him not entirely sure where he is. To say he's on edge would be an overstatement, but he's far from confident and comfortable. That's understandable, Aizawa says, taking a long drink of his coffee. He pulls out his phone and taps his thumb against the screen. Izashi's going to be here in a few hours. For now, look alive. You three have visitors. A few seconds later, there's a knock at the door before it slides open. The first person that steps through is a police officer with a dog quirk. Izuku doesn't recognize him. The second person is Manuel, who looks tired but doesn't seem to be harmed after the events of last night. The third person is very familiar. Izuku brings his hand up and waves with his fingers. Hi, Tsukuuchi-san. The detective blinks at him in surprise, then huffs a laugh and shakes his head. You know what? I don't even know why I'm surprised anymore. It's always you giving me paperwork. Izuku's responding grin is big and happy, probably the closest he's been to his sunshine smile in a while. The man with the dog quirk looks between Izuku and Tsukuuchi-san, but ultimately just shrugs and steps forward. I'm the chief of police, Surigame Kenji. We're here to discuss what happened last night between you three and the hero killer Stain. Before anything else can be said, Ida's out of bed and bent over in a low bow. I take full responsibility for my actions and everything that resulted from them, he says. It was my recklessness that got these two into further trouble, and they don't deserve any punishment that could be put on them. He doesn't even rise after he's done speaking, arms held straight at his sides, his head so low it almost is hidden by the bed in front of him. Aizawa sighs and pinches the bridge of his nose, but he doesn't say anything. Chief Surigame blinks at Ida, ears twitching like he wasn't expecting a full confession so soon into the conversation. He finds his voice after a moment. What you did was illegal. You split from your mentor, and used your quirk on a villain in search of revenge. That's vigilantism, which is an arrestable offense. He glances at Aizawa, and then at Jetta, and then looks at Manuel last. However, since there was a pro who eventually made it there, and ultimately Stain was apprehended and is now in custody, we're deciding to be lenient with you. Ida straightens immediately, shock and relief warring for dominance on his expression. You were never there, Chief Surigame says. Neither of you students were there. We're crediting Stain's capture to Jetta. No. Jetta interrupts, and Izuku's gaze snaps to her. She looks furious. Absolutely not. No way in hell are you spinning it like that. I have no say or control over what that one did. She points to Ida. And I understand not giving him credit, but Void had clear and express permission from me to use his quirk. If he hadn't been there, we'd all be dead. He more than pulled his own weight. That takedown was a joint effort. Chief Surigame stares at Jetta for a long moment before he glances at Tsukuchi-san, who simply shrugs. She's telling the truth, Tsukuchi-san says. And that's not to mention the Nomu that Void took down earlier in the night, Manuel says with a nod at Izuku. I may not have escaped without injuries had he not been there. Izuku blushes under the praise of the two pro-heroes. I'm sure you could have handled it, he says, not sure if he wants to readily offer himself up to the possibility of the night actually being a success. Aizawa shifts on the bed. I suggest leaving Void's name out of the report on the Nomu entirely. He takes a sip of coffee, when everyone turns to him, both Tsukuchi-san and Chief Surigame tilting their heads curiously. He's already on the League of Villains' radar, from the USJ incident. No need to make it worse. For the same reason, any mention of him regarding Stain should be his hero name only. Don't mention a civilian name or that he's from UA. Don't show an identifiable picture either. I'm saying this as both his teacher and his legal guardian. A small dog-like sound, not quite a bark, escapes Chief Surigame before he sighs. All right. It makes things more complicated for everyone, but it's one less lie to the public. Jetta and Void will take credit for apprehending Stain. Eraserhead, I'll leave Tenya's punishment to you. For a moment, Izuku's confused why Chief Surigame is on a first-name familiarity with Ida, but then he remembers that Ida chose his given name as his hero name, and he hasn't changed it yet. He wonders if Ida had been planning on taking up the mantle of Ingenium now that his brother is no longer able to be a hero, which is distinctly not true, and Izuku would personally love to visit Ingenium with a list of reasons to keep going and resources to get him back out on patrols, even if it's as a sidekick instead of a solo hero. And he wonders even more if Ida will feel comfortable doing that now that he's tarnished the world view with a brief stint into vigilantism. Ingenium has weight, after all, a legacy in both the hero world and the Ida family. Aizawa nods. I'll handle it. His voice is firm and edged in steel. Izuku does not envy Ida for the coming lecture that Aizawa is sure to give him, but he doesn't feel bad for him at all. Going after Stain was Ida's idiotic choice, and nearly dying and being able to live with the shame of doing something wrong is not going to stop him from being tempted by something similar in the future. Izuku knows this from experience. If he hadn't gotten permission from Jetta to use his quirk, he wouldn't have. Izuku is simply that terrified of Aizawa's ire, after already being on the receiving end of his lecture once. Good. Chief Surigame nods. I'll take my leave then. I wish you all a swift recovery, and for what it's worth. Thank you. He bows low and holds it for a moment before turning and leaving from the room. Manuel steps forward, and there's a frown on his face that Izuku doesn't think is typical for him. Tenya, we're going to take a walk. Ida, who hasn't sat back down yet, quickly scrambles out of the door. Izuku thinks he seems rather eager for someone walking to the gallows. Manuel nods at the four of them, remaining in the room before exiting and closing the door behind them. Now that circus is over, Tsukuchi-san says, stepping toward Izuku's bed and pulling up a chair. I already talked to Jetta, but it's your turn. I need you to relay the events of last night to me, from your perspective. Question before we start, Izuku says, his brows dipping in faux seriousness as he watches Tsukuchi-san's hand pause over the audio recorder. Do you ever get tired of being the only competent interviewer in the police department? Adjacent to Izuku, Jetta bursts into laughter. Tsukuchi-san, for his part, snorts and shakes his head. You're impossible. Let's get this over with. They spend over an hour going through the play-by-play of the attack, as Izuku remembers it. Tsukuchi-san stops him, often to ask clarifying questions. Sometimes Izuku has good answers, and sometimes he can only shrug. How did he know there was a Nomu in Hosu? Because he still has nightmares of his dad being slammed into the ground, and he'll never forget the noise they make for as long as he lives. How did he know to go looking for Ida and Stain? He literally has no idea why his gut decided to start pointing like a hunting dog. By the time Tsukuchi-san takes his leave, Izuku is well and truly ready to be rid of the hospital for good. With only 3 days left of internships and Jetta not cleared for discharge yet, unless she goes against medical advisement, which she has mused about for a second before Izuku would threaten to call Dark Knock and post him in the room. Izuku knows he's going home, especially when Hisashi enters the room with tears already pooling in his eyes. Yeah, even if Jetta was fine, he doubts his dads would let him out of their sight right now. He may be a hero in training, but he's still just a kid. Their kid. So he's not going to begrudge them, wanting to make sure he's safe and healing properly. Still, he doesn't like saying goodbye to Jetta. He likes her, and he wants to see her again soon, and he wants to do his work study with her, and he wants to invite her over for holiday dinners. She laughs when he mumbles all of that into her shoulder, their arms wrapped around each other as they say goodbye. She promises to call and text and take care of herself, and Izuku promises to practice what she taught him and reach out if he feels like he's drowning and send dark knock emails to make sure he's checking on her. It's the longest goodbye he's ever had to deal with, and part of him never wants it to end. Eventually, after a detailed conversation with a doctor about his recovery and the long process of getting him checked out, Izuku ends up in the back seat of Hizashi's car, cradling his phone in his hands as he stares down at his contact list. Because it's easier, he texts Amajiki-senpai first. Not sure if you saw the news about Hosu, but I'm alive. Thank God. Are you okay? Was in the hospital last night, but yeah, I'm okay. Good. I have Saturday off if you want to hang out or something. Mirio wants to meet you, and we both finally have time. Yeah, that sounds great. I'll let you know a time. Is it okay if I bring Hitoshi? I think most people call that a double date. Yeah, that's fine. Great, I'll see you then. In all the time Izuku has known Amajiki-senpai, they've never hung out, and no, the cafeteria on the second day of the school year does not count. He's cautiously thrilled about it, but at the same time he feels sort of guilty because there's probably no way Amajiki-senpai would do this if he hadn't been worried about Izuku. Conflicted about what he's supposed to be feeling, Izuku texts Satoshi to see if he's awake. Given that he's interning with underground heroes and he's never had a great sleep schedule to begin with, it's entirely possible that 2 o'clock in the afternoon is his new 4 in the morning, but no, almost as soon as Izuku sends the message, his phone is ringing. Izuku! Hitoshi's voice is panicked and relieved and scared and worried all at once. Oh my God, are you okay? Please tell me you're okay. Guilt slices through Izuku like a hot knife, and he winces and turns to look out the window. Hey, Hitoshi, I'm okay. He lets out a slow breath in an attempt at making his chest stop hurting. It's tight, like his heart can't beat correctly, and he knows it's not Amahaki because the god is settled around Izuku's shoulders like some sort of cold-blooded cat. I'm sorry for worrying you. Again. I'm not taking your apologies this time, Hitoshi says, somehow managing to sound firm and on the verge of tears at the same time. You didn't do anything wrong. It was just bad fucking luck in those stupid League of Villains. Still, Izuku says, almost whispering, I don't like getting hurt and making you worry. There's a pause, and then, you got hurt? Shit. I thought Dad told you, Izuku says, eyes flicking toward Aizawa in the front seat so that he can glare daggers into the back of his head. He hopes it gives him a headache, or makes his current headache worse if he's already got one. Yeah, my mentor and I ended up running into Stain during the chaos at the Nomu attacking. We're both okay now. I didn't even get hurt that bad, but Amahaki knocked me on my ass for a while. How bad is not that bad, Izuku? From the muffled rustle of fabric and the soft sounds of footsteps, Izuku assumes that Hitoshi is pacing. For a moment, he debates not telling Hitoshi the whole truth. He could just say it was a knife wound and leave it at that, but he doesn't like lying to Hitoshi, plus, he's incredibly bad at it. It's like you don't trust my judgment, he teases, unable to stop himself from deflecting with humor. When Hitoshi just growls in response, Izuku snorts and relents. Yeah, fair. I got stabbed through the hand with a knife, straight through the bone. The doctors healed me without surgery, I guess. The bones were severed cleanly, but I'm going to have some physical therapy to get all the function back in my fingers. They said permanent nerve damage is a possibility. Fuck, Hitoshi whispers before going quiet for a long time. Okay, I mean, you fought the hero killer, and you walked away with just one stab wound. Realistically, that's pretty good. Izuku laughs, the sound bubbling out of him unexpectedly. He's not really surprised, though. Hitoshi can always make him laugh. I kind of passed out in the alley from exhaustion, so it wasn't much walking away as it was getting carried off on a stretcher, but yeah, for facing Stain, I'd say a single stab wound is pretty good. He sighs and closes his eyes, head falling against the window. I was the least injured person there. He feels guilty for that, too. I'm sure it'll be on the news this afternoon or tomorrow morning. Jeddah fought to get me credit in the takedown. He smiles, gentle and tired, and wishes Hitoshi was here to see it. I got famous first. Hitoshi scoffs. Technically, you were famous before I met you, even if your name was never in the news. Doesn't count if my name is not in the news, Izuku says, matter-of-fact tone and a mischievous grin. Hitoshi barks out a laugh, and Izuku feels lighter. Say, Amajiki-senpai's boyfriend wants to meet me. Are you free to hang out on Saturday? Hizashi squawks in surprise from the driver's seat, but Izuku ignores him for now. If he didn't know Amajiki and Togeda are dating, and have been for a while, that's on him. Night or day? Hitoshi asks. Because I leave Yokohama mid-morning on Saturday, and I won't have slept that night, so if you want me to be coherent, night would be better. Izuku shrugs, forgetting for a moment that Hitoshi isn't actually here to see him. Hamajiki-senpai didn't give a time, but he said he has the whole day off. Night should be fine, as long as we're not out at a stupid hour. I'm basically under protective house arrest at the moment, so honestly, I don't even know if we'll be going out or just watching movies in the living room. Aizawa twists in his seat, so that Izuku can see his eye roll. Izuku sighs. What? I'm right. Adam, and he rolls his own eyes right back. He's smiling, though. He hasn't been this relaxed and unburdened around his family in too long. I'll make it work, Hitoshi promises. If Izuku wasn't currently stuck in a car with his dads for the next hour and a half, he would tell Hitoshi that he loves him. Out loud, right now he would do it, but he does not want to deal with his dads in the aftermath of that, so he settles for, "You're the best." I know. He sounds smug. He's earned it. Will you text Shoto for me? Don't give him details. I'll fill him in later. Just tell him I'm okay. Izuku would do it himself, but he's tired. A nap for the rest of the drive is in store, he thinks. Yeah, of course. Hitoshi pauses for a moment, and Izuku's eyelids droop at the sound of his steady breathing. It reminds him of recovering from the kidnapping, of nights spent waking up from bad dreams, of phone calls in the early hours of the morning, only to be able to fall back asleep to the sound of each other's breathing. You sound exhausted, he says, and Izuku thinks he can hear him sitting down. I was about to take a nap. Do you want to stay on the phone? Izuku smiles, something incredibly warm and fond blooming in his chest. Yes, please. Hitoshi hums. Okay, I will. I'll be right here, Izuku. Get some rest. Thank you, Toshi. Good night, Izuku. All right, listeners. This concludes Chapter 39, A Swallow the Stars. Chapter 40 will be next. I hope you all are still enjoying, and as always, thank you all so much for listening.